Buenos días.
Good morning.
Declaro abierta la sesión número 9978 del Consejo de
9,978th
Seguridad.
meeting of the Security Council is called to order.
En el orden del día provisional de esta
The
sesión
provisional
figura
agenda
el
for this
siguiente
meeting
punto:
is
la
the
situación en
situation
Oriente Medio,
in the Middle East.
Queda aprobado el orden del día.
The agenda is adopted.
De conformidad con el artículo 37
In
del
accordance with
Reglamento
Rule
Provisional del
37
Consejo,
of the Council's Provisional Rules of
invito a
Procedure,
la
I
delegación del
invite the
Yemen
representative
a
of Yemen
participar
to
en esta
participate in
sesión.
this meeting.
Así queda acordado.
It is so decided.
De conformidad con el artículo
In
39 del
accordance with
Reglamento
Rule
Provisional del
39 of the
Consejo,
Council's Provisional Rules of
invito
Procedure,
a participar
I
en
invite
esta
the
sesión a
following
los siguientes
briefers to participate
exponentes.
in this meeting.
Señor Hans
Mr.
Grundberg,
Hans Grundberg,
enviado especial del
Special
Secretario
Envoy
General
of
para el
the
Yemen,
Secretary General for
y
Yemen,
señor Ramesh
and Mr. Ramesh
Raja Singham,
Rajasingham,
director de la División
Director,
de Coordinación
Coordination
y
Division,
jefe
Head
y
and
representante de la
Representative
Oficina de
of the
Coordinación
Office for
de
the
Asuntos
Coordination of
Humanitarios en
Humanitarian
Ginebra.
Affairs in Geneva.
Así queda acordado.
It is so decided.
El Consejo de Seguridad comenzará
The
ahora el
Security
examen
Council will
del
now
punto
begin its
2 del orden del
consideration
día.
of item 2 of the agenda.
Doy la palabra al
I now
señor
give the
Hans
floor to Mr.
Grundberg.
Hans Grundberg.
Gracias, señor ministro.
Thank you very much,
Señor presidente.
Minister. Mr. President.
Mr. President, the regional turmoil continues to erode prospects for peace and stability in Yemen, where the situation remains deeply fragile. There is an urgent need for proactive and pragmatic measures that can pave the way for peace in Yemen. We must remain steadfast in our shared efforts to propel Yemen toward a future where the country is at peace with itself and with the region. Last month, when I briefed this council, I outlined 3 priorities to lay the groundwork for lasting solutions to Yemen. The first was supporting de-escalation on the front lines and working with the parties on the tenets of a ceasefire. While the front lines have mostly seen stable levels of hostility, on the 25th of July, we saw a significant assault on the Aleb front in Sada Governorate, resulting in high numbers of fatalities and injuries on both sides. We also see Ansar Allah fortifying its positions, including around Hodeidah city. These developments are concerning and highlight the need for active de-escalation and security dialogue between the parties. Last week, my office concluded the latest series of meetings with government of Yemen and regional security actors under the auspices of the UN-facilitated Military Coordination Committee. The work of the MCC is crucial to de-escalation along the front lines and preparations to implement and manage a future ceasefire. Over the course of the week, the parties discussed the role of the MCC in de-escalation along those front lines that have experienced renewed hostilities over the past year. They also addressed challenges in the maritime domain, exploring options that could be pursued in the event of a return to ceasefire negotiations. The second priority is establishing a path for talks between the parties in line with the commitments made toward the roadmap in December 2023. To not lose sight of these commitments, it is essential that measures that build trust and improve the day-to-day lives of Yemenis continue. In this regard, we're seeing positive and ongoing momentum to address road access in different parts of the country, and notably the route connecting Baida and Abyan governorates. I want to acknowledge the valuable contributions made by civil society in advancing these efforts and express my full support for these initiatives. I encourage the parties to open more key roads and to take further steps to facilitate movement of people and commercial activity. My office remains ready to support efforts toward this goal. Mr. President, the parties can also make progress toward broader political talks by finding solutions and compromises that enable the effective functioning of Yemen's economy to deliver goods and services for all. In recent discussions with government officials, business representatives, and civil society in Aden, my office continued to push for dialogue to address the root causes of Yemen's economic issues. Further economic escalation and fragmentation is in no one's interest. It is crippling Yemeni households and has a stranglehold over Yemen's private sector. It is vital to find the will and space to act, and the time is now. In this regard, I welcome the recent steps taken by the Central Bank of Yemen in Aden and the government of Yemen more broadly to address the recent currency depreciation. I congratulate both on the marked improvement of the exchange rate in government of Yemen areas. I also commend the government of Yemen for its efforts to stabilize the prices of essential goods in light of the recent appreciation of the currency. I hope that these steps mark the start of a sustained recovery. Mr. President, to make continued progress, as I have said before, the parties need to take actions that build trust and good faith. Unfortunately, we have seen the opposite in the last month, with unilateral and escalatory decisions that risk deepening divisions within institutions and state structures. There are numerous examples of such decisions. One is the issuance of the new 50 Riyal coins and 200 Riyal notes by Ansar Allah, which contributes to the fragmentation of the Yemeni Riyal and complicates future discussions to unify the Yemeni economy and its institutions. There are several other examples of unilateral decisions aiming at dividing institutions rather than unifying them. These are steps in the wrong direction. Instead, I urge dialogue between parties, which is the only way to bring about long-term sustainable solutions on all matters which affect the day-to-day lives of the Yemenis. The third priority is the continued work with the region and the international community to stabilize and support Yemen. This includes addressing the need for security guarantees, including with respect to the Red Sea. The recent seizure off the Red Sea coast of Yemen of a significant cache of weapons and technology once again underscores the importance of reminding all member states of their obligation to fully comply with the UN Security Council resolutions concerning the UN's arms embargo. Mr. President, following the sinking of 2 ships off the west coast of Yemen in early July, some of the surviving crew members of the motor vessel Eternity Sea have still not been repatriated to their home countries. I strongly encourage Ansar Allah to enable their immediate repatriation. For Yemen to have a real chance for peace, it must be protected from being further drawn into the ongoing regional turmoil emanating out of the war in Gaza. Therefore, the strikes against civilian ships in the Red Sea must cease. The missile attacks against Israel and the subsequent Israeli strikes on Yemen must also come to an end. Beyond complicating the mediation space for a long-term settlement of the conflict in Yemen, this escalation has led to the near destruction of Yemen's west coast port facilities. This is placing immense strain on Yemen's vital infrastructure. As an example, unloading at Salif port took 3 times as long last month compared to June. Only 2 ships berthed in July and spent the entire month there. The increased waiting and unloading times at both Al Hudaydah and Salif ports are a major source of concern, with both ports serving as critical entry points for essential food commodities. This trajectory can be stopped, but instead we see escalation, notably the announcement of Ansar Allah on the 27th of July, expanding the scope of vessels that it would target. A de-escalation in violence and renewed focus on diplomacy are urgently needed to protect both the people of Yemen and provide broader regional stability. Mr. President, today is International Youth Day. In Yemen, the role of youth in overcoming hurdles towards a political process is not to be underestimated. In all of Yemen's significant moves toward peace and prosperity, young people have been in the forefront in demanding more from those in power. We take their role seriously, and in the recent political dialogue sessions that my office initiated, we heard their principled and grounded perspectives, as well as their concerns over economic deterioration, pushing youth to the front lines. All parties need to do more to empower youth in building Yemen's future. Mr. President, the 23 UN detainees, alongside those from national and international NGOs, civil society organizations, and diplomatic missions, remain in a desperate situation. This is unacceptable. They need to be released unconditionally and immediately. I want to again thank this Council for its continued advocacy for the release of these detainees, as well as for your broader support to Yemen. As I have said so many times before, reaching a solution, a sustainable solution to the situation in Yemen is not only possible, but it is essential. While there are no simple solutions to the challenges we face, we must strengthen our collective efforts, guided by our shared commitment to lasting progress in Yemen. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Agradezco al señor
I thank
Grunberg la
Mr.
información
Grunberg
que ha
for
proporcionado.
the information that he has provided.
Doy ahora la palabra
I now
al
give the
señor
floor to
Ramesh
Mr. Ramesh
Rajasingham.
Rajasingham.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank Special Envoy Grunberg for his briefing and his update, and this Council for its sustained interest in Yemen. At the outset, let me reiterate that a political solution remains the only sustainable, concrete path towards a more secure and prosperous future for all people in Yemen. Without it, current cycles of violence, both local and regional, along with economic devolution and endemic humanitarian need, will persist. The crisis in Yemen is a political crisis with a staggering impact on millions of people and their communities. People who do not choose who controls the areas where they live. Humanitarian assistance can work to keep people alive, but only a political solution can make them safe. Mr. President, last month, OCHA provided this Council with an update on the deteriorating state of food security in Yemen. The numbers bear repeating. More than 17 million people are going hungry. This figure may crest 18 million by February next year. Women and children bear the brunt of this disaster. And Yemen is now one of the most food insecure countries in the world. As the economy continues to collapse and pressures on the food pipelines mount, many households with access to food can no longer afford it. Livelihood across the public sector and agriculture and fisheries industries, among others, have been disrupted by ongoing conflict. Mr. President, it is all too easy to reduce Yemen's crisis to numbers. But let us consider what food insecurity means today for ordinary Yemenis. Half of the nation's children under the age of 5 suffer from acute malnutrition, and nearly half suffer from stunting. This means developmental delays and infections and a risk of death from common illnesses 9 to 12 times higher than average. In a context where healthcare is desperately inadequate and where support services are unavailable to many, this is a life or death gamble for children. And for 9-month-old Ahmed in Abs district in Hajar Governorate, lack of food and nutrients left him less than 2/3 of a healthy weight. So frail that he couldn't sit up and suffering from severe diarrhea and a high fever. His mother Hafsa was doing her best under appallingly difficult circumstances. But Ahmed still required emergency treatment for severe acute malnutrition, complicated by infection. And all this at only 9 months of age. This is not an isolated story. It is the daily reality for thousands of families and their children. And they do deserve better. In some locations, hunger and malnutrition are extreme. In camps for internally displaced persons in Abs district of Hajar Governorate, for example, a needs assessment mission in July found children from displaced families dying of starvation. These are children who have died not from war wounds, but from hunger, slow, silent, and preventable. This is the human face of food insecurity. Hunger forces people to make terrible decisions, negative coping strategies as we frequently refer to them. But what does this mean in real human terms? In rural areas of the governorates of Al-Mahwit, Al-Hudaydah, and Sana'a, It means families are having to sell off everything that would sustain their livelihoods in the long term. Livestock, tools, their agricultural land, just to afford food for tomorrow. It means that children are forced to work instead of going to school. And it means that women and adolescent girls face heightened risks of domestic violence, exploitation, or child marriage. In these 3 governors alone, more than 30,000 women and girls have sought support services for gender-based violence just in the last 6 months. Nearly 1/3 of women now aged 20 to 24 were married before they were 18. Nearly 1 in 10 were married before they turned 15. Among girls in displaced communities, these figures are even higher. These families and these girls also deserve better. Mr. President, starvation is preventable, and humanitarian organizations remain on the ground despite limited resources and operational challenges, with a singular goal of reaching those most at risk before it is too late. After receiving alarming information of the acute food insecurity and malnutrition situation in IDP camps in Abd district last month, for example, the humanitarian system, including UN, INGOs, local NGOs, and the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, quickly mobilized to provide life-saving interventions. Humanitarian partners have prioritized the food response to 8.8 million of the most at-risk people, all in emergency or catastrophic situations. So it will come as no surprise that such efforts require support, both political and financial. Mr. President, in addition to the work of our international partners to support those in need, we are ensuring that local actors are empowered and resourced to respond in the most efficient and effective ways. The Yemen Humanitarian Fund will be releasing $20 million to address the negative impacts of food insecurity. This allocation will be guided by frontline responders and local communities, those who know where the needs are greatest and how to best respond. This funding will be focused on reaching those suffering the most. It can help prevent a parent feeling they have no option but to sell a daughter into early marriage. It can help protect a displaced family from relinquishing the last of their assets. And it can help ensure that the most vulnerable, including displaced people, refugees and migrants, have access to urgent nutrition, healthcare, and clean water. This year, 2/3 of allocations from the Yemen Humanitarian Fund have gone directly to local partners. And we hope to make continued use of this resource as a nimble, flexible, and fast vehicle to address critical life-saving needs. Mr. President, alongside support for the Special Envoy's efforts towards a political solution and the release of detainees, I focus my calls to action for this month on 2 things. 1, increased funding now to scale up urgent emergency food and nutrition support. And 2, direct financial support for the Yemen Humanitarian Fund. Given the right tools, local partners can make a huge difference. Thank you.
Agradezco al señor Rajasingan la
I
información
thank
que ha
Mr. Rajasingham
proporcionado.
for the information provided.
A continuación formularé una
I shall now
declaración
make a
en
statement
calidad de
in my
ministro
capacity as
de Relaciones
Minister for
Exteriores
Foreign
de Panamá.
Affairs of Panama.
Excelencias,
Excellencies,
expresamos nuestro
we
agradecimiento y
express our
reconocimiento
gratitude
al enviado
and
especial del secretario general para
recognition to
Yemen,
the Special Envoy
Hans
of the
Grunberg,
Secretary General for Yemen, Mr. Hans
y al jefe
Grunberg,
representante
and to
de
the head and
OCHA
representative
en
of
Ginebra,
OCHA in
Ramesh
Geneva, Mr.
Rajasingham.
Ramesh Rajasingham.
La República de Panamá
The
lamenta
Republic of Panama
profundamente
deeply
y
regrets,
reconoce que la
and we
situación de
acknowledge
seguridad
that the
alimentaria
food
en
security
Yemen
situation
es
in Yemen
alarmante
is alarming
y continúa
and
deteriorándose
continues
día
to
a día,
worsen day by day,
convirtiéndose en una de las
becoming one of
peores
the
crisis
worst
humanitarias
humanitarian
a nivel
crises
mundial.
worldwide.
Actualmente,
Currently,
más de la mitad de la
more than
población,
half of the population,
aproximadamente
that's to say
17.1
approximately
millones de personas,
17.1 million
enfrentan
people,
niveles severos de
face severe
inseguridad
levels of food
alimentaria.
insecurity.
Esta crisis afecta de manera
This crisis
desproporcionada a las personas
disproportionately
desplazadas
affects internally
internamente
displaced persons,
muchas de las cuales ya viven
many of whom
en
already
condiciones de
live
extrema
under conditions
vulnerabilidad
of extreme
enfrentan
vulnerability
riesgos
and face
crecientes
growing
de caer en
risks of falling
situaciones de
into
inseguridad
catastrophic
alimentaria
food
catastrófica.
insecurity.
Reconocemos y
We
valoramos
recognize and deeply
profundamente los
value the
esfuerzos
efforts of the
de las oficinas
United
de las
Nations
Naciones
Office
Unidas
for the
para la coordinación de
Coordination of
asuntos
Humanitarian
humanitarios,
Affairs,
OCHA,
OCHA,
cuyo compromiso ha sido
whose commitment
fundamental
has been
para
essential
visibilizar
in
esta
bringing
crisis
attention to
y
this
canalizar
crisis
las
and
asistencias
in channeling
humanitarias.
humanitarian assistance.
La labor de los trabajadores
The work
humanitarios
of humanitarian
es crucial
workers is
para
crucial
aliviar el
to
sufrimiento de
alleviate
millones
the
de
suffering
yemeníes
of millions of
y para sostener
Yemenis
las condiciones
and
mínimas
in
de
order
vida
to
en
maintain
un
minimum
contexto tan
living
complejo y
conditions in
desafiante.
such a complex and
Por
challenging
ello,
context.
Panamá reitera el urgente
For
llamado
this
a la
reason, Panama
liberación
reiterates
inmediata
its
e
urgent call for
incondicional
the
de todas las
immediate and
personas
unconditional
detenidas
release
de forma
of all
arbitraria,
persons arbitrarily
incluidos
detained,
representantes de las Naciones
including
Unidas,
representatives of the
de
United Nations,
organizaciones no
also
gubernamentales
from non-governmental
nacionales e
organizations, both national
internacionales,
and
así
international,
como miembros de la
as well
sociedad
as
civil
members
y
of
del
civil
cuerpo
society
diplomático.
and the diplomatic corps.
Tales detenciones son
Such
absolutamente
detentions are
inaceptables y
absolutely
contrarias al
unacceptable
derecho
and contrary
internacional
to international
y
law
a los principios
and the fundamental
fundamentales de
principles
esta
of this
organización.
organization.
En este sentido,
In this regard,
expresamos nuestro
we
firme rechazo
express
y
our
condena.
firm rejection and condemnation.
Excelencias, en apego
Excellencies,
a nuestra posición de principios,
in line with our
consideramos
position of principle,
fundamental
we
que este
consider it
Consejo
essential
mantenga
that this
una
Council
posición
maintain
clara
a clear
y firme.
and firm
Las
stance.
rutas marítimas estratégicas
Strategic
deben
maritime
mantenerse como
routes
espacios
must
de
remain
navegación
spaces of
segura,
safe, free,
libre
and
y abierta.
open navigation.
Esta necesidad fue
This
destacada
need was
por
highlighted
numerosas
by
delegaciones
numerous
durante
delegations
el debate
during
celebrado
the
el
debate
día
that was
de ayer.
held yesterday.
Las rutas marítimas estratégicas
Strategic
no
maritime
deben,
routes
bajo ninguna
must not,
circunstancia,
under any circumstances,
convertirse en
become
instrumentos de
instruments
presión,
of pressure,
coerción
coercion,
o
or
confrontación,
confrontation,
especialmente frente al
especially
aumento de los
in the face of
conflictos
increasing
y
conflicts
tensiones
and
regionales.
regional tensions.
Su estabilidad
Their
constituye un
stability
pilar
is an
esencial
essential
para la
pillar
paz
for
y seguridad
international peace
internacionales,
and security,
así como para el
as well
funcionamiento
as for
de
the
las cadenas de
functioning
suministro.
of supply chains.
En este contexto, la toma de marinos como
In
rehenes
this context, the taking
constituye
of
una grave
seafarers as
violación
hostages
del derecho
constitutes a
internacional
serious
y de los
violation of
principios
international law
humanitarios
and of the
más
most
fundamentales
fundamental
y no
humanitarian
puede ser
principles,
tolerada.
and it cannot be tolerated.
Reiteramos, por tanto,
We therefore
nuestra más
reiterate
enérgica condena
our most
a los
robust
ataques
condemnation
ilegales
of the
e
illegal as
injustificados
well as
contra
unjustified
buques
attacks
mercantes
against
y embarcaciones
merchant
comerciales
and
en el Mar
commercial
Rojo,
vessels in the Red Sea
perpetrados por los
perpetrated
hutíes.
by the Houthis.
Estas acciones representan
These
una
actions
amenaza
represent
seria a
a
la
serious
seguridad
threat
marítima
to international
internacional
maritime
y deben
security,
cesar de
and they must
inmediato.
cease immediately.
Hacemos un llamado a
We
todas
call upon
las
all
partes a
the parties
abstenerse
to
de acciones
refrain from
unilaterales
unilateral
y a
actions
comprometerse
and to
con un
commit
enfoque
to a
coordinado
coordinated,
basado en el diálogo
dialogue-based
que priorice
approach
el bienestar
that
del pueblo
prioritizes the
yemení.
well-being of the Yemeni people.
Así, Panamá se mantiene
In this way,
firmemente
Panama
comprometido
remains firmly
con la
committed
búsqueda de
to
una
the search
solución
for a
política,
political,
inclusiva,
inclusive,
duradera y
lasting
pacífica
and peaceful
al conflicto
solution
en Yemen,
to the
a
conflict in
través del
Yemen
diálogo
through
constructivo y la
constructive
cooperación
dialogue
con
and
todos
cooperation
los actores
with all
involucrados.
actors involved.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Vuelvo a asumir las
I
funciones
now
de la
resume my
presidencia
function
del
as
Consejo.
President of the Council.
Doy ahora la
I
palabra
now give
a la
the floor to
delegación
the delegation
del Reino Unido.
of the United Kingdom.
Gracias, señor ministro, y
Thank
bienvenido al
you,
Consejo de
Minister,
Seguridad.
and welcome to the Security
I
Council.
thank Special Envoy Grunberg and Director Rajasingham for briefing us today. President, I will make 3 points. First, it is now 1 month since the latest Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea, which resulted in the tragic loss of life of at least 4 crew members. The UK reiterates its unequivocal condemnation of ongoing Houthi attacks and calls for the immediate release of those taken hostage. As we highlighted in yesterday's high-level open debate, maritime security must be safeguarded. I reaffirm the UK's support for Resolution 2722 and the principle of freedom of navigation. The Yemen Maritime Security Partnership, or YMSP, is an essential mechanism for international cooperation with the aim of protecting Yemen's waters, safeguarding maritime trade, combating illicit activities, and rebuilding the capabilities of the Yemen Coast Guard. The UK is proud to co-host the inaugural YMSP high-level conference on 16 September in Riyadh, alongside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We call upon international partners to join and support this initiative. Second, the UK commends the recent interdiction of 750 tons of weapons intended for the Houthis by forces aligned to the government of Yemen. This illicit transfer of weapons directly undermines the stability of Yemen and the wider region, and is in clear breach of the arms embargo. We call upon all member states to ensure full compliance with Resolution 2216. Third, as we've heard today, Yemen faces worsening food insecurity. 18.1 million people, over half the population, are projected to experience increasing food insecurity in the next 6 months. Some areas face catastrophic levels of food insecurity for the first time in almost 2 years. We need quick and collaborative action from the international community in order to reverse this trajectory and to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. The UK once again reiterates its call for the immediate and unconditional release of aid workers arbitrarily detained by the Houthis. These detentions are making humanitarian access more difficult and dangerous at a time when the needs of Yemenis are rapidly increasing. President, the UK remains committed to supporting the efforts of the Special Envoy and his team in charting a path towards long-term stability and security. It's what the people of Yemen and the wider region need and deserve. I thank you.
Agradezco las
I
palabras a la delegación
thank
del Reino
the
Unido.
United Kingdom for their
Ahora-
statement.
Le paso
I now
la
give
palabra
the
a
floor
la
to the
Federación de
Russian
Rusia.
Federation.
Господин министр,
Mr.
приветствуем вас
Minister,
в качестве
we
председателя
welcome you as
нашего сегодняшнего
president
заседания.
of today's meeting.
Благодарим спецпосланника
We thank
Генсекретаря по
the
Йемену
special envoy of the SG
Ханса
for Yemen,
Грунберга
Hans
и директора
Grunberg,
по
and the director
координации УКГВ
of the Coalition Division
Рамеша
of OCHA,
Раджасингхама
Ramesh
за
Rajasingam,
содержательные
for their
доклады.
detailed briefings.
Ситуация в
The
этой арабской
situation in this
стране
Arab country
продолжает
continues to
оставаться
be
крайне
extremely
нестабильной.
unstable.
На ряде
In a
направлений
number of
вдоль
areas
линии
along the
соприкосновения
line of control,
фиксируется
there's
ухудшение
been
обстановки в
deteriorated
сфере
security
безопасности.
conditions, as well
Вспыхивают
as
спорадические перестрелки
sporadic
и
exchanges of
вооруженные
fire and
столкновения.
armed skirmishes.
При этом ни масштабных
Fortunately,
перемещений войск,
no
ни активных
large-scale troop
наступательных действий
movements nor
йеменскими
active
сторонами пока, к
offensives
счастью, не
on the part
ведется.
of the parties to the conflict have been
Тем не
observed.
менее,
However,
из-за напряженной военной
the
обстановки
tense military
усугубляются
situation
и без
in
того
the country
непростые
is exacerbating
социально-экономические
the already
реалии для
fraught
местного
socioeconomic
населения.
realities faced by the local population,
Ограничивается его
limiting their
доступ к
access
жизненно важным
to
товарам и
essential
услугам,
goods
при
and
том, что
services at a
гуманитарные
time when
потребности изо дня
humanitarian
в день
need
возрастают.
is growing
Все
day
эти
after
факторы
day.
создают
All of these
неблагоприятный
factors
фон для
create an
усилий
unfavorable
по
backdrop for
общеевенской
efforts to
нормализации.
normalize the situation in Yemen.
Господин председатель,
President,
как отметил сегодня
as
господин
was noted
Раджасингхам,
today by Mr.
одним из
Rajasingam,
наиболее
one
острых
of the
гуманитарных
most
вызовов на
pressing
сегодняшний день
humanitarian
является
challenges
хроническая нехватка
currently is
продовольствия
the
в
chronic
Йемене.
food shortage in
В стране
Yemen.
недоедают
In
порядка
this country,
17 миллионов человек,
17
включая
million
детей.
people, including children,
По
suffering from
имеющимся
hunger.
данным,
According to
это количество к
estimates,
началу следующего
this
года
number
увеличится
by the
еще на
beginning of
миллион.
next year will be increasing by another 1
Особенно
million.
плачевно обстоят дела в лагерях
Situation
для временно
in
перемещенных
IDP
лиц.
camps is especially tragic.
Такая ситуация
This
требует скорейшего
situation
выправления.
requires immediate rectification.
Рассчитываем, что
We
структуры и
hope that
агентства ООН,
UN bodies
работающие в
and
Йемене,
agencies working
будут
in
играть
Yemen
более
will play a
активную
more
роль
active role
в
in
содействии
supporting the
долгосрочному
country's
развитию
long-term
страны, не
development
ограничиваясь
and not
гуманитарной
limit
помощью.
themselves to humanitarian assistance.
Последнее,
This
безусловно,
assistance,
необходимо,
although of
однако она
course is
должна
necessary,
сопровождаться
ought to be
стратегическими
accompanied
программами
by
развития.
strategic development programs.
частности, в текущих
In
условиях
particular,
проблем с
in the current
продовольствием особую
circumstances,
значимость
with food
приобретает
security
обеспечение
issues, it's
внутреннего
especially
устойчивого
important to ensure
производства.
sustainable domestic production in
Йеменцам
Yemen.
нужно
The
предоставить
Yemenis must
возможности
have the
для
opportunity
восстановления и
to
развития
restore and
собственной
develop their own
сельскохозяйственной
agricultural
отрасли, включая
sector,
внедрение
including introducing
устойчивых к
modern
засухе и экстремальным
agro-technologies
погодным условиям современных
that are resistant to
агротехнологий.
drought and extreme weather events.
Такие меры
These
позволят не
measures
только повысить
will not
уровень
only
продовольственной
improve
безопасности,
food
но и
security,
создать
but
рабочие
also will
места,
create
снизить
jobs,
зависимость от
reduce
внешней помощи и
dependence
заложить
on
основу для
external aid,
стабильного
and
экономического
pave
роста
the
в
way for
будущем.
stable economic growth in the future.
Господин председатель,
President,
на Йемене по-прежнему напрямую сказывается
Yemen
общерегиональная
is still being
напряженность,
severely
что
affected by
проявляется,
the
среди прочего,
regional
в неспокойной
tensions, which
обстановке в
manifest
близлежащих
as
к нему акваториях.
instability in adjacent waters.
Наша позиция в
Our
этой связи
position
неизменна.
on this issue
Россия
remains
категорически
unchanged.
осуждает
Russia
любые действия,
categorically condemns
препятствующие свободе
any
морской
actions that
навигации и
hamper
создающие
the freedom
угрозу
of
для мирных
navigation
кораблей,
and that
их
jeopardize
экипажей и
civilian
грузов.
vessels, their crews and cargo.
Последовательно призываем
We continue
руководство
to
движения
call
Ансар
on
Аллах
leaders of Ansar
проявлять
Allah
сдержанность
to
и не
exercise
допускать
restraint
шагов,
and
ведущих
to
к
not take
дальнейшей
any steps
эскалации.
leading to further
Исходим из
escalation.
необходимости
We
дальнейшей
believe it's
работы
important
в
to
целях
continue
долгосрочной
to work
стабилизации в Красном
toward
море и
long-term
Аденском
stabilization in
заливе
the Red
исключительно
Sea and the Gulf of Aden
политико-дипломатическими методами.
through solely political and diplomatic means.
Важной вехой в этом контексте
An
стало то,
important step in this context is
что нападений на коммерческие суда не наблюдалось почти
an
полгода.
important milestone is that
Очевидно,
there
что
have not
одним
been
из
attacks observed for
факторов,
almost 6
спровоцировавших их
months.
возобновление,
And
стала
factors leading to their
продолжающаяся
resurgence
военная
include the
операция Израиля в
continued
секторе
military
Газа
operations of
и фактически
Israel in
установленная
Gaza, as well
Западным
as the de
Иерусалимом
facto
гуманитарная блокада
humanitarian
анклава.
blockade of this enclave by West Jerusalem.
На этом фоне принципиальная
In
позиция
this
Ансар Аллах в
context,
защиту
the
палестинского
position of
дела
Ansar Allah to
находит
support the
поддержку у
Palestinian
значительного
cause
числа
has found
граждан
sympathy
ближневосточных
among many of
государств,
those who care about the suffering
неравнодушных к страданиям
of
жителей сектора.
inhabitants of Gaza.
Это в очередной
This
раз
once again
подтверждает, что без
shows
прекращения
that
огня
without a
в Газе
ceasefire
и
in Gaza,
справедливого
it is futile
урегулирования
to hope
палестинской
for
проблемы
resolving
рассчитывать на устойчивую общерегиональную деэскалацию не
the
приходится.
situation and leading to regional de-escalation.
Через эту же призму следует рассматривать и
This is the prism we should
израильско-хуситское
use to
противостояние,
view
которое,
the
увы, продолжает
Israel-Houthi
накаляться.
confrontation, which
На
alas continues to
запускаемые практически
rage.
ежедневно ракеты
The
и
Israeli
беспилотники
leadership
из
responds to the
Йемена
near-daily barrage
израильское
of
руководство
missiles
реагирует
and
в
drones
характерной для
from
себя
Yemen
непропорциональной
with their
манере,
characteristic
раз за разом
disproportionate
санкционируя
responses,
масштабные бомбардировки
repeatedly
йеменских портов по
authorizing
побережью
large-scale
Красного
bombing
моря.
of Yemeni ports on the coast of the
Последний такой
Red Sea.
авианалет
The last such
произошел
airstrike
чуть
took
более
place
2 недель
just
назад,
over 2 weeks ago.
непосредственно в момент, когда
At the
поблизости
time,
находились
same
сотрудники
time
миссии
as
ООН в
staff
Ходейде,
from the UN mission in
осуществлявших патрулирование
Hodeidah,
подшефных им
carrying out
территорий.
patrols of zones under their responsibility, were in
Исправное
close
функционирование
proximity.
порта Ходейда
The
крайне
smooth
важно для
functioning of the
обеспечения
Hodeidah port
бесперебойной
is
гуманитарной
extremely
деятельности
important for
в этом районе
uninterrupted
Йемена.
humanitarian activities in Yemen.
На настоящий же момент
Currently, its
инфраструктура
infrastructure
в нем
has
практически
been virtually
уничтожена,
destroyed,
что не позволяет рассчитывать на
so
достижение прежних
prospect
объемов
for
перевалки грузов,
restoring
имеющих
former
ключевое
volumes
значение
of
для
cargo
снабжения северных
transit,
провинций Йемена
which
всем
is so
необходимым.
important for supplying northern provinces of Yemen, have become bleak.
Получается, что и в ситуации с Йеменом
In
израильские
situation with
лидеры
Yemen,
устраивают
the
коллективные
Israeli
наказания для
leaders
простых
are
жителей этой
collectively
страны,
punishing the
делая
inhabitants
жизнь
of
там
that country,
невыносимой.
making their lives intolerable.
Господин председатель,
President,
мы твердо убеждены,
we
что
firmly
оптимальным
believe
сценарием
that the
для преодоления
optimal scenario
накопившихся в
for
стране и вокруг
overcoming
нее
the
проблем
problems
будет
accumulated in the
всеобъемлющий
country and
межйеменский мирный
around it
процесс,
would be a
в субстантивное
comprehensive
участие в
inter-Yemeni
котором
peace
приняли бы
process in
все
which
стороны
all parties to the
конфликта,
conflict would take
включая движение
substantive
Ансар
part,
Аллах,
including
ключевые
the
соседи
Ansar
Йемена.
Allah movement, as well as important neighbors of Yemen.
Призываем вас,
We call
Ханс,
on
активно
you, Hans,
побуждать
to
йеменских
actively
протагонистов к
encourage
укреплению доверия,
the
к
Yemeni actors
возобновлению
to
диалога с
strengthen
прицелом
trust
на
in
окончательное
a
оформление
resumed
дорожной
dialogue with
карты
the goal of a
йеменского
definitive
урегулирования.
roadmap toward resolving the Yemeni situation.
При этом полагаем,
At the
что и
same time,
самим
we
йеменцам
believe
стоило
that
бы проявить
the Yemenis
определенную инициативу в
themselves
этой
ought
связи.
to show some initiative in this area,
Ведь дальнейшее усугубление
because
внутреннего
any further
раскола в стране
exacerbation
чревато
of
подрывом всех
divisions in
мирных
the country
инициатив
could
и
undermine
закреплением
any peace
фактической
initiatives
фрагментации
and
Йемена.
foment the de facto fragmentation of
Если
Yemen.
события пойдут по такому
If
сценарию,
events
это в
do
конце
this
концов
kind
может
of turn,
привести
then
к
in the end it
возобновлению
could lead
активной
to a
фазы
renewal of
гражданской
the
войны в
active
стране
phase of civil war
и
in the country and
неконтролируемым
spiraling
последствиям для всего
consequences
региона.
for the entire region.
Важно сделать все, чтобы
It's
избежать
important to
этого
do all we
разрушительного
can
сценария.
to prevent this worst-case scenario.
Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you.
Agradezco las palabras del representante de
I
Rusia.
thank the
Y ahora es el
Russian
turno
representative of the Russian Federation
de
for
la
their statement,
República
and
de
I now
Corea.
give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also welcome you for your presence today. I would also like to begin by expressing our appreciations to Special Envoy Hans Grunberg and OCHA Director Raja Singham for their briefings. As evidenced by the Emergency Security Council meeting convened just 2 days ago, the situation in the Middle East remains both deeply volatile and alarming. The Republic of Korea is truly, gravely concerned about ongoing potential ripple effects across the region, including in Yemen. In this regard, my delegation believes that now is the time for all parties to exercise maximum restraint and avoid steps that could further inflame wider regional and global instability. Against this dire backdrop, I would like to deliver the following key points. First, we strongly urge the Houthis to permanently cease all attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Following a temporary pause since the end of 2024, Houthi attacks resumed last month. The targeting of the MV Magic Seas and MV Eternity Sea resulted in casualties for the first time in a year. These unacceptable incidents have disrupted humanitarian and commercial supply routes, driven up prices of essential goods such as food and fuel, and threatened global maritime security. Freedom and safety of navigation in the Red Sea is a vital prerequisite, not only for regional security, but also to ensure humanitarian access. Second, the Republic of Korea unequivocally demand that the Houthis release all the remaining survivors from the MV Eternity Sea. Last month, the Houthis released a propaganda video showing 10 survivors of the Eternity Sea attack, claiming they had been rescued and transferred to a safe place. This narrative obscures the fact that the so-called rescue would never have occurred in the first place without the Houthi attack, which led to the death of 4 crew members from the same vessel. This is simply irrational and deeply disingenuous. We also reiterate our principled call for the Houthis to immediately and unconditional release of all arbitrarily detained UN, NGOs, civil society, and diplomatic personnel. Third, we are alarmed by the unprecedented food insecurity and worsening humanitarian situation for internally displaced persons. The IPC Acute Food Insecurity Analysis recently warned that nearly half of southern Yemen's population in government-controlled areas, almost 5 million people, are now experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. And over 18 million people are projected to face crisis-level hunger, the worst since 2022, while 4.7 million IDPs endure harsh conditions with limited access to basic services, leaving the vulnerable most at risk. The international community must scale up humanitarian support to prevent further tragedies. To this end, the Republic of Korea remains committed to easing sufferings of the Yemeni people. This year, we are providing 23,000 metric tons of rice through WFP to help alleviate nutritional deficiencies among refugees and internally displaced communities. Lastly, Mr. President, my delegation hopes that the consistent diplomatic efforts by the Special Envoy and the international community will bring the derailed political roadmap back on track. To do so, all parties, especially the Houthis, must prioritize the peace, well-being, prosperity, and inclusive future of the Yemeni people. Korea reaffirms its commitment to a Yemeni-led, Yemeni-owned, inclusive political process that can help usher in this brighter, sustainable future for all. I thank you, Mr. President.
Damos las gracias a la República de Corea.
I thank the
En estos
Republic of
momentos
Korea,
le pasamos la
and
palabra
now
a
I give the
Guyana.
floor to Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Algeria, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Guyana. We appreciate the valuable updates provided by Special Envoy Hans Grunberg and Mr. Rajasingham on the situation in Yemen, and welcome the participation of the Permanent Representative of Yemen in today's meeting. We also take this opportunity to extend our heartfelt condolences to the families who lost loved ones in the boat tragedy that occurred on 3rd August 2025 off the coast of Yemen. Mr. President, the Council meets today as Yemen faces a deepening crisis aggravated by political deadlock, worsening economic and humanitarian conditions, and retaliatory strikes between Israel and the Houthis. The A3+ shares the briefer's concern about the impact of escalatory actions in Yemen and the broader region on the mediation space in Yemen. We urge all parties to de-escalate tensions and exercise restraint. We also called for sustained momentum towards achieving a Yemeni-owned, Yemeni-led political resolution through an inclusive peace process under UN auspices and with the active participation of all stakeholders, including women and youth. We underscore that any further delay in resuming comprehensive political dialogue will only deepen divisions and prolong the suffering of the Yemeni people. It is therefore essential that confidence-building measures, including the reopening of roads, airports, and ports, be prioritized to foster trust between the parties and facilitate humanitarian and economic activity. We commend the UN Special Envoy and regional partners, especially Saudi Arabia and Oman, for their ongoing efforts and encourage the parties in Yemen to continue working toward breaking the deadlock and achieving lasting peace. We also reiterate our appeal for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, recognizing that the ongoing war has negatively impacted peace efforts in Yemen. We are confident that a permanent ceasefire in Gaza will help to de-escalate tensions in the region and promote conditions favorable to sustainable and lasting peace. Additionally, while we note that there were no new incidents in the past month in the Red Sea, the A3+ expresses deep concern over the uncertainty of the situation. We therefore urge the Houthis to release the 10 seafarers being held hostage who were rescued from the Greek-operated cargo ship Eternity Sea, which they attacked and sank in the Red Sea last month. Mr. President, turning to the deepening humanitarian crisis in Yemen, the A3+ remains deeply concerned about the impediments to humanitarian access and the impact of reduced funding on humanitarian operations. With food security projected to worsen in the coming months, we renew our call for the international community to urgently increase support for the humanitarian response and contribute more to the 2025 Humanitarian Response Plan. We are alarmed to hear that the funding crisis is hindering the delivery of critical life-saving assistance, including health and protection services, at a time when over 19 million people in Yemen still need humanitarian assistance and protection services. We also stress the imperative for humanitarians to be able to operate with safety and unimpeded access to deliver aid to those in need, and demand that the Houthis immediately and unconditionally release all aid workers and staff of UN agencies, NGOs, civil society organizations, and diplomatic missions being arbitrarily detained in Yemen. We further call upon all actors with influence to use their leverage to secure the safe release of these individuals without delay. The targeting, harassment, or detention of humanitarian workers not only violates international humanitarian law, but also undermines the neutrality and effectiveness of humanitarian operations, placing millions of lives at risk. Mr. President, while the need for increased humanitarian aid to Yemen is urgent, it is important to recognize that such assistance alone cannot resolve the country's multifaceted crisis. We therefore also emphasize the importance of implementing sustainable economic recovery mechanisms to promote long-term stability in the country. In this regard, we have taken positive note of the Yemen Food Security Response and Resilience Project being implemented by the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, to improve agricultural production infrastructure and build climate resilience. We also echo the calls made by the government of Yemen for assistance to resume oil and gas exports as a crucial step towards achieving stability and economic recovery in Yemen. Finally, Mr. President, the A3+ reiterates its firm support and commitment to the unity, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Yemen. We continue to stand in solidarity with the Yemeni people in their quest for peace, security, and dignity, and urge the international community to prioritize Yemen and to provide adequate funding to sustain aid operations and recovery efforts in the country. I thank you.
Le damos las gracias a la representante de
I thank the
Guyana.
representative of Guyana.
Y ahora el turno es de la
Now,
República
I
de
give the
Francia.
floor to the Republic of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je voudrais remercier l'envoyé
I would
spécial
like
du
to
secrétaire
thank the
général,
Special
M. Hans
Envoy
Grunberg,
of the Secretary
directeur
General,
du
Mr. Hans
BCH,
Grunberg, and
Rajasingham,
Mr.
de leur présentation.
Rajasingham, Director
également
from
saluer la
OCHA,
présence
for
parmi
their
nous du représentant
briefings,
permanent
and I
du
also
Yémen.
welcome the representative of
Monsieur
Yemen
le Président,
to the meeting. Mr. President,
la France
France
condamne
once
de
again
nouveau les attaques et
condemns
provocations
the
injustifiables des
unjustifiable
Houthis.
attacks and provocations by the
Leurs
Houthis.
attaques en mer Rouge,
Their attacks in the
doivent
Red Sea must stop,
ainsi que celles qui
as
continuent de
must
viser le
those
territoire
that
d'Israël.
continue to target the territory of
Le Conseil
Israel.
doit pouvoir les condamner.
This Council must
sans
be able
ambiguïté.
to condemn them without ambiguity.
Les menaces que les Houthis font planer sur le
The
trafic
threats
maritime
posed by the
constituent une
Houthis to
entrave
maritime traffic
inacceptable à la
are an
liberté de navigation.
unacceptable impediment to freedom of
La France
navigation.
rappelle son attachement
France
à la
reaffirms
liberté de
its
navigation
commitment to
en mer
freedom
Rouge,
of
comme partout
navigation
dans le
in the
monde.
Red Sea as everywhere else in the
Poursuivra son
world.
engagement dans
We
le
will
cadre de
continue our
l'opération
engagement
défensive
within the
de
framework
politique de sécurité et
of
de
the
défense de l'Union
EU's
européenne
defensive
ASPIDES
operation
afin de
of the
protéger
Common
la sûreté
Security
maritime
and Defense
et la liberté de
Policy,
navigation
ASPIDES,
en
in order
conformité
to
avec le
protect
droit
maritime
international
safety
et en
and
lien avec
freedom
ses
of
partenaires.
navigation in accordance with international law
Les
and in
États fournissant
coordination
des
with our
armes aux
partners.
Houthis, notamment l'Iran,
States providing
doivent
weapons
cesser
to the
de le faire.
Houthis, notably
L'embargo
Iran,
sur les armes
must cease
doit
to do
être
so.
respecté.
The arms embargo must be respected.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
la France déplore les
France
souffrances
deplores the
inacceptables
unacceptable
infligées aux
suffering
populations civiles.
inflicted on the civilian
Le
population.
risque de famine,
The risk of famine
particulièrement
is
inquiétant.
particularly alarming.
les plus vulnérables,
The most
à
vulnerable,
commencer par les enfants
starting with
et les personnes
children
déplacées,
and displaced
qui
persons,
sont très exposés.
are highly exposed.
Les filles
Girls
souffrent à la fois
suffer
des conséquences
both the
directes
direct
et
as
indirectes
well as the
du manque de
indirect
nourriture.
consequences of food
Il n'est
shortages.
pas acceptable que leur mariage
It's not
forcé
acceptable
serve
that
souvent
forced marriage
simplement à leur
often
famille à
serves
récolter
the
l'argent
purpose
nécessaire à l'achat de
to enable
nourriture.
their families
Non,
to obtain money
ceci n'est pas
needed to
acceptable.
purchase food. This is just unacceptable.
Les Houthis ont une responsabilité
The
prépondérante
Houthis
dans la
bear a
dégradation de la situation
predominant
humanitaire.
responsibility for the
Nous
worsening
exigeons
of the
d'eux la levée
humanitarian
de toutes les
situation.
entraves à
We
l'accès
demand that they
humanitaire,
lift all
ainsi que la
obstacles to
libération sans
humanitarian
condition des
access
personnels
and that they
humanitaires et des
unconditionally
Nations Unies,
release
ainsi que
humanitarian
des
and
représentants
United
de la
Nations
société
personnel,
civile
as well
yéménite
as
et
representatives
des
of
missions
Yemeni
diplomatiques
civil
encore
society
détenues.
and diplomatic missions who are still
Ce
being
Conseil
held.
doit appeler toutes les
This
parties
Council must
à
call on
assurer
all
la
parties
protection des
to ensure
infrastructures
the
et des populations
protection of
civiles
civilian
en conformité
infrastructure
avec leurs obligations
in
en vertu du
accordance
droit
with their
international humanitaire.
obligations under under international humanitarian law.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
la fin du conflit au Yémen
ending the
passe par une
conflict in
solution
Yemen
politique
requires an
inclusive
inclusive
au
political
terme d'un processus
solution,
politique
resulting
interyéménite
from an
sous l'égide des
inter-Yemeni
Nations Unies.
political process under the
La
United
France
Nations.
réitère son plein soutien en ce
Auspices.
sens aux
France
efforts de
reiterates
médiation
its full
de l'envoyé
support for the
spécial du
mediation
secrétaire
efforts
général.
of the Special Envoy in this
Ce
regard.
processus politique
This
devra
political
permettre la
process
participation des
must
femmes
enable the
et des
participation
jeunes.
of Yemeni women and youth.
Pour conclure,
Finally, France
France réaffirme à nouveau
reaffirms
son attachement
once
à
again
l'unité,
its commitment to
à
the
la
unity
souveraineté,
and
à
stability
l'intégrité
of
territoriale,
Yemen,
à la stabilité du
to
Yémen
the
et à
territorial
la
integrity
sécurité
of
régionale.
Yemen, and
Je
to
vous remercie.
regional security. Thank you.
Le damos las gracias a la
I
delegación de
thank the
Francia
delegation of France,
y en este momento le
and I
pasamos la
now give the
palabra
floor
a China.
to China.
Your Excellency, Foreign Minister Martinez Acha, I welcome your presence at the Council to preside over today's meeting and thank Special Envoy Grunberg and OCHA Director Raja Singham for their briefings. I also welcome the participation of the representative of Yemen at this meeting. President, Yemen is now in the grips of a persistent political impasse, a fragile security situation and a grim humanitarian crisis, with Israel and the Houthis trading attacks. The Red Sea situation remains tense. The international community should come together to make a concerted effort towards, as early as possible, a political settlement of the Yemeni issue and a return to peace and stability in the Red Sea. I wish to make 3 points. First, the security of the Red Sea shipping lanes must be maintained. Last month, the Houthis attacked 2 cargo ships, causing casualties, which China finds deeply concerning. We call on the Houthis to respect the rights of commercial vessels, regardless of the country they are from, to sail in the Red Sea in accordance with international law and to stop harassing or attacking them. The shipping lanes in the Red Sea must be kept safe and secure, civilians, including seafarers, protected, and Yemen's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity also respected. Second, active efforts are needed to move the peace process forward. The Yemeni issue can be resolved only through political means, and the truly viable way to achieve that is through dialogue and negotiation. China calls on the 2 parties to the conflict to resume engagement, move in the same direction, demonstrate the greatest sincerity in resolving the differences, build the greatest possible consensus for reconciliation, and make the greatest effort to restore peace. China supports the work of Special Envoy Grunberg in this regard. Third, the humanitarian crisis must be eased as soon as possible. Yemen is experiencing one of the worst food crises in the world, with nearly half of its population facing acute food insecurity and about 4.8 million people displaced. Life is particularly hard for vulnerable groups, including women and children. The international community must ramp up humanitarian assistance to Yemen, support the country's economic development and efforts to improve its livelihood, and help the Yemeni people tide over these hard times. The safety of UN personnel and humanitarian workers must be guaranteed. President, what is happening in Yemen and the Red Sea is closely linked to the overall situation in the Middle East. 2 days ago, the Security Council met in an emergency session in the chamber on the situation in Gaza. The message from that meeting was clear and unequivocal, to wit, that the vast majority of Council members opposed Israel's plan to take over Gaza, opposed Israel's continued military operations in Gaza, and opposed Israel's weaponization of humanitarian aid. The international community must take all actions necessary to bring the fighting in Gaza to an end without delay, mitigate the impact of the humanitarian catastrophe, and de-escalate the overall situation in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
Muchas gracias a la delegación de China.
I thank the delegation of China, and I now give the floor to the delegation of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We warmly welcome your presence and your presiding over today's meeting. Yemen continues to face one of the world's serious humanitarian and political crises. Millions endure hunger, disease, and economic collapse. The political process is stalled, and security situation remains deeply troubling. This cannot be allowed to persist. The people of Yemen deserve a future of peace, dignity, and security, not perpetual conflict. We thank Special Envoy Hans Grunberg and Director OCHA, Raja Singham, for their briefings, and appreciate the continued UN efforts and engagement in the political and humanitarian areas, including the recent technical meetings in Amman under the Military Coordination Committee. Yet, the implementation of the December 2023 roadmap, which we believe is a viable framework for peace, has been painfully slow. There is an urgent need to break the current stalemate through renewed political will and concrete steps towards an inclusive peace process and political settlement. The humanitarian needs are staggering. 19.5 million people require assistance. Severe food insecurity affects millions, and preventable diseases remain widespread. It is essential to ensure predictable and sustained humanitarian funding to meet these needs. Mr. President, Yemen's economic situation remains dire, which has been further compounded by unilateral monetary measures that risk fragmenting the financial system and undermining the 23rd July 2024 understanding on economic de-escalation. It requires urgent, coordinated action to stabilize the economy and deliver immediate relief. Mr. President, Pakistan condemns the recent attacks on commercial shippings, detentions of seafarers, including loss of civilian lives, as well as strikes on civil infrastructure. Such actions not only exacerbate Yemen's fragility but also threaten regional peace and stability. Pakistan calls for de-escalation, dialogue, and diplomacy to safeguard peace across the Middle East. We reiterate our strong condemnation of the continued arbitrary detention of UN personnel, humanitarian workers, and diplomatic staff by Houthis and demand their immediate and unconditional release. In closing, Pakistan reaffirms its support for the UN-led peace process in close coordination with regional countries, and it stands ready to work with all Council members to advance a negotiated settlement, alleviate human suffering, and help Yemen move towards lasting peace. I thank you, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias a la delegación de Pakistán.
I thank the delegation of Pakistan.
Le damos la palabra a la delegación de los Estados Unidos.
Of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, Foreign Minister Javier Martinez-Acha. Thank you also, Special Envoy Grunberg and Director Raja Singham for your briefings. I would also like to welcome the representative of the Republic of Yemen at this briefing. Last month, the United States condemned the Houthis' unprovoked terror attacks in the Red Sea against two civilian cargo vessels, the Magic Seas and Eternity Sea. The latter attack resulted in the tragic loss of at least 4 mariners, many others injured, and the complete loss of both ships. After hampering rescue efforts, the Houthis then kidnapped and continue to detain at least 11 crew members of the Eternity Sea, adding to the numbers they have unjustifiably detained. We call for the kidnapped crew members' immediate and unconditional release, just as we continue to call for the release of all UN, NGO, and diplomatic staff held for over a year. The attacks on commercial vessels are a clear demonstration of the Houthis' destabilizing presence in the region and interference with freedom of navigation. They also demonstrate Houthi responsibility for severe economic, environmental, and security threats against the people of Yemen and the region. In the wake of these unjustified attacks, the Houthis amplified their threats against commercial maritime traffic through the Red Sea and issued specific threats against ships that dock at Israeli ports. As recently as August 8th, the Houthis fired a missile at Israel, targeting Ben Gurion Airport. We stand with Israel in its right to self-defense against the Houthis. Iran's defiance of this Council's resolutions enables the Houthis to escalate regional tensions. Iran's continued support for the Houthis also poses a threat to the people of Yemen and to freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. In that regard, the United States commends Yemeni government-aligned forces for their July seizure of at least 750 tons of Iranian weapons bound for the Houthis. We urge the UN Secretariat to facilitate an inspection of that seizure by the Yemen panel of experts as soon as possible. Houthi actions also threaten the well-being of the people of Yemen. Houthi attacks on commercial shipping advance their own interests with little regard for how they impact the region or the Yemeni people. The attacks have made it more difficult to get basic goods and humanitarian assistance to Yemen and other countries in the region. The Houthis have also conducted shakedowns of importers of basic goods, and they've raided warehouses of humanitarian organizations, threatening to take over their assets if they do not cooperate with the Houthis' criminal enterprises. They continue to arrest and detain Yemeni people, including UN and diplomatic staff, in their effort to silence dissent at home and consolidate control through fear and intimidation. Their corrupt practices and issuance of counterfeit currency undermine the legitimate currency of Yemen and the overall economy.